All right. Welcome, everybody. My name's Alan Holm. I'm a product manager with Marketing Cloud. And today I'm going to be covering how to power your mission-critical transactional messages with Marketing Cloud's new transactional and event notification APIs. So I may make some forward-looking statements during this presentation. Just please be mindful and make any buying decisions off of existing Salesforce features and products. So the first thing I want to do is baseline and discuss what a transactional message is. I'm sure a lot of you have the concept and have actually experienced what a transactional message is, but how do we actually classify it different from all the other messages that we may receive? So the key thing to know that with a transactional message, it's person-initiated, non-promotional, basically saying, I wanted to have this message sent to me, and I want it sent to me immediately. So primary examples of this are password resets, fraud alerts, two-factor authentications, and things like e-receipts and order confirmations. You expect those as soon as you buy something at a store. You would expect to get that in your inbox right away, just in case you have to turn right around and go back to the service desk about something. The second type of a transactional message, I would say, is that you can still have transactional messages not necessarily sent one-off, singleton, but you can actually have them sent by a system in a somewhat batched fashion. But again, I was expecting the delivery of these for such things like top-of-the-morning delivery notifications. Or there could be a weather alert that has to go out to a known audience, or financial alerts to a subset of contacts. So those are our two primary examples of what we consider a transactional message. And timing is imperative and latency is imperative. Now, transactional messages aren't just about getting the recipient the information. You can actually capitalize on these messages as well for your brand. So if we think about it, if you get a confirmation or a message that you actually asked for, you're going to engage with it to make sure it has all the details you were expecting. So transactional messages have really, really high engagement rates, and they're always one-to-one. It's not like it's a segment of audience. That's going to have, something that relates to a large swath of individuals. It's actually very specific to me and interesting to me. So what that basically means for your brand is that it allows you to capitalize on that message, specifically on what they may have purchased. You can provide product recommendations. You can ask them to go out and provide perhaps a review on the product on social media. And when you consolidate between marketing and between the operational side and the IT side onto the same platform to encompass all of this capability and all of this engagement, it overall reduces your cost to serve. And because you're on the Marketing Cloud platform, what that means is now you can combine the transactional information and the engagement data and the operational data, along with all of your campaign data, along with all of your subscriber-specific and all of their personalization information in order to make sure you understand the behaviors of your customers, both from their buying decisions and what their interests are. So that was a brief overview on what is a transactional message, how do you take advantage of it on the Marketing Cloud. But now I want to talk about what makes transactional messaging on Marketing Cloud so interesting. We have 5 investment themes that we have been after for a while, and we're continuing to invest in. The first is all about accelerating our sends. Who here is familiar with Marketing Cloud triggered sends, if that is a buzzword that any of you recognize? A few of you in the audience. So triggered sends has been our traditional way to invoke a message in real time. But what we've done is we've taken a step back and said, hey, we know that hasn't been the most performant in terms of what customers are demanding today. So we doubled down and we improved how quickly and how low latent transactional messaging has to be. And not only that, but we also know you need feedback in real time. And so because of that, not only do you get very rapid responses back at an API level that, yes, we've captured your request to send a message, but we'll also send you notification on the disposition of that message as well in near real-time fashion through webhooks. The second is our developer focus. So what we've done is we've ensured that there's consistency in the design in the API across channels. today, if you look at our API landscape, you'll see that SMS has a certain schema, push has a certain schema, email has a certain schema, and different object identifiers that may or may not mean the same thing. With this new transactional messaging API, we ensured there was consistency across channels. And that goes as well in terms of the one experience and the improved developer experience and how we're designing our documentation, how we're going after new SDKs, and how we're trying to provide you the tools to be successful, such as Postman examples, things like that. The fourth one here is around operational measurements. So not only can you now build real-time operational dashboards through webhooks, but we're continuing to invest in ways to serve up real-time information. Oftentimes in Marketing Cloud, the way that you collect data is you build custom reports through query activities, and you review those reports semi-frequently, daily, hourly, but we know that you want to build upon and create real-time dashboards, and so we're investing in APIs that can support that. And this is all done on a new scalable platform. So if you're familiar with triggered sends and on Marketing Cloud, we had a certain queuing paradigm. This is now all implemented through a new in-memory queuing process we call direct inject, which basically takes the request from the servicing machine and pushes it right into the rendering engine. So that was a lot of words. Let's talk about it, though, as a picture. So how you would set this up if you wanted to use transactional messaging on Marketing Cloud is you have your system that's going to be generating transactions. And oftentimes, those systems will operate on a singleton type manner. And what you're going to do is all you need to do is inject who it needs to go to and the personalization data related on that transaction, and then an identifier that we call a definition, which encompasses the subscription policies. So do you want to allow that person to come into Marketing Cloud, or do you have a subgroup, for example, that you only have a certain customer base, and if somebody comes in sideways, they weren't supposed to be entered, we can protect against that. And the email template as well, and this is where you can lean on marketing and your branding to build and manage the assets so that the code that's actually embedded into your transactional systems don't need to be updated frequently, if at all, once it's done. Once we render the message and we send it out to our email MTAs or our SMS aggregators, we're going to provide you a disposition in your real time. So you'll either get a sent that it was successful and it's on its way for delivery, a not sent, which is an error in how it was processed, or you might get a sent initially, but then you'll get a bounce event back asynchronously as well. So with that real-time feedback, what you can effectively do is then build some conditional logic. So if you have a recipient who is opted into several channels, but they have a primary channel that they're interested in, if suddenly there's a problem sending to that channel, you'll get notification of that, and you can default back to the secondary channel and try on that. That's just one example of how to use this real-time feedback loop. So now from the actual API perspective, and I'm going to go into a demo here in a moment in how these actually look, but I want to cover with you the new URI structure. So for those of you who are familiar with Marketing Cloud APIs, the services within Marketing Cloud are broken down into the specific services. So this service is called the messaging /v1, and then it goes along this path of what is a channel you want to create, and then what is a particular object that you want to operate on. So the first one here is definitions. This is the first time that you can actually send definitions through REST. You used to have to do that through a SOAP API, or you could do it through the UI. Now, this is uniquely through a REST endpoint. So this is where you say, I want this content template with it. I want these subscriber policies with it. And you only set this up one time. You don't do this with every single send. It's not a two-step API process. Within definitions, we have this concept of queuing. So you can deactivate, but still keep the definition of live, and we'll just block any messages from going out and start to queue that up. So with the queues route, you can take a look at both what is the statistics around the queue, what's the age of the oldest record, and what's the depth of the queue, and you can ultimately delete the queue. So let's say you had an upstream problem, some data corruption, you can actually stop sending momentarily, fix your upstream problem, flush out the queue, and resume sending. So it's basically a guardrail. The sending API then is another new API, and the most important element here is for the if you wanted to send an email on, let's say, the specific channel of, on email, we have this new attribute called message key. Message key is going to be your identifier to track the message through the system. Oftentimes, you could think of it as a transaction ID. We have deduplication protection in there, so if you go and send the same message key twice, we won't permit it. And then finally is our tracking, which is a callbacks endpoint. And this is where you state what URL you have stood up that is listening for our callback events, and you can tell us what particular events you're interested in sending. So let's quickly walk through how you would set this up, and then I'm going to jump over into my REST client here to work through some real examples. So the pattern is that for the first time and only once, for every use case, you set up a send definition, because you're going to have a specific template with personalization variables in that template that you're going to want to create and reference at send time, along with the subscription policies. So in this case, the subscription policy is I want to make sure everybody gets added who comes in into my all subscribers list, and I want to also incorporate all of the information about what was injected into the send into a data extension, which is basically a table inside of Marketing Cloud you can use for tracking. The next thing you'd want to do, if you already have a callback URL set up and verified, then you can set up what subscriptions you want to track. In this case, I'm tracking everything. So there's transactional send events, category type, and we can track the email sent, the not sent, and bounce. So I will get a flood of all information possible into this endpoint. So be mindful of your scale, that what comes in must also be equally scalable as it's received on your endpoint. And this final piece is a piece that I integrate into my transactional system. This is where I'm going to reference that definition key there you can see in the JSON payload, along with the recipient data. So who is it going to? What is my identifier I want to use in Marketing Cloud? And what are the personalization attributes? So in this case, I'm sending Astro a reminder that he has an appointment at 9 a.m. You'll see as well in bold there that I have the message key, and that's that unique transaction ID provided in the URI. So just like you can do this for email, coming out in the next release, you'll be able to also do this for SMS. You can see the consistency there in the API design, and the patterns are the same, and all of the way that the HTTP responses are structured are also the same. So the key thing here is time to value, time to implement, and code reuse. All right, so let's go ahead and jump into the demo. So here, I'm creating a new send definition, and I do this one time, because this describes exactly what template I would want to send against, and I don't need to provide all elements of the object. So once I create the definition, I'm using the messaging route here along definitions, and the key that I use, this is the name of the attribute that I'm going to use to reference this for every send. And this is just a friendly name. Both definition key and name must be unique. I can give it a description. And then my content customer key attribute here references the template in Content Builder. So if you go into Content Builder in Marketing Cloud, in the list of content, you'll see an opportunity to copy something called customer key. That's what you copy and bring over. It starts off as a GUID, but you can always rewrite it as something human readable. And oftentimes, I see marketers tend to like that more so, because when you do reporting, your reporting is based off of these content keys. So it makes it easier for you to sort out what's what. And then on the subscriptions, in Marketing Cloud, there's this concept of you can have lists or you can have all subscribers, which basically means access to everybody. And that's what this policy says, is that for every send, I want to ensure that they are monitored against all subscribers inside of Marketing Cloud. And then here I have a data extension, which is basically a table I created in order to track the input into the API, all of the different attributes that I'm sending. When I save that, on the right-hand side, what you can see is then we actually give you all of the information about the object. So you can actually inject more than what I've created as a minimum here. I can have a particular classification type. All we support is transactional classifications, but by default, we'll use Marketing Cloud's default transactional classification, which is basically your send profile, who's it from, and your delivery profile. Do you have specific IP address you want to send out of? And then as well, here are some additional policies that are included on the definition. If I wanted to update the definition, I now write to the particular definition key that I created, and I use a patch verb. I can change, for example, the status into active or inactive to pause or resume this definition, and the response back is basically just the entire structure of the object as it's now represented. Key thing I want to go over is then when you delete a definition, what we do is we will add a new name and create a new key for that definition as a GUID. And the reason that we have to do this is because inside Marketing Cloud, everything must be unique. And we actually keep reference of these definitions as well, and we need reference of those definitions for tracking. And that's why they're long-living. So you've deleted them, but within Marketing Cloud, they're still effectively maintained, but they go into a status of deleted. So just be aware, if you ever want to know what might have been previously deleted, you'd have to keep reference of this new identifier. On the queue side, if I were to access my definitions and /q as the URI, I can now see some queue stats in here. Let me go to the prettier view. So I can see, in this case, I have nothing queued, but I would normally get age, seconds, and the count. And then if I wanted to delete the queue as well, it would just return back a response ID for you. Here is an example of where I created a definition where the email didn't actually get validated by the marketer. And so when I were to create that, I would get a validation error to say, this content cannot be rendered, so I'm not going to deploy a definition. And then finally, you can get back lists of definitions as well by using get on the definitions route. And with this, you can define your page size, what you want to sort by, what you want to filter by, and what page you want on. So it just gives you a real friendly way in order for you to fetch high-level object data, then you can drill down further if needed. So now let's get into the sending. On the sending side, I've switched my URI now to messages, and I'm providing a unique identifier as my message key. And I'm referencing that definition key that I just created here in the request. And then here's my recipient data. So I'm sending it to myself. But let's say, pretend my name is Astro. And when I send it, the key thing to note is it's a 202 accepted. It's asynchronous. So just because we accepted a response does not necessarily mean that it was sent. But, and the reason we do that is because we want to ensure that our latency on API responses are as low as possible. So what I'll do is I'll spot check, and I'll turn right around and get the status of that message key that I just received, and I can see that the email was sent. In the same fashion, if I send a bad example here, so example.com is not a permitted domain for you to send to. If I go back and check this message key, we can see it was not sent, and I got this specific type of error known as list detective, which is a proprietary domain validation and email address validation that we have within Marketing Cloud. So you know that, hey, somebody put in some bogus data. We're not going to send it to protect your IP reputation. So now I'm going to go on to the event piece. So what I just showed you was how to check the send status basically directly through REST. But that's a paradigm where you're reaching into Marketing Cloud, and we don't want you to establish that as a pattern. It's good for spot checking, add some sort of health monitoring to make sure that what you expect to going out is going out. But if you want to actually check status at scale, we want you to use webhooks. And so this is the schema of our webhook types, and you can see there's some basic data that's provided. We gave you the business unit from which the event was produced, the definition key from which the event was produced, the timestamp, event type. But then as you go down a little bit deeper into the info section, you can see we give you information about who it applies to, and then what the rationale was for that particular type of event. So if it was a bounce, we describe what the bounce type of error was, or if it was a validation error, or if it was a subscriber error, we'll give you more details on that as well. So what I want to do is, with the limited time that I have, show you an example of the type of application that you can actually build. So here we have our event monitor. And what I can do then is take a look at all of the different types of emails that were sent. So as a customer, I can build real-time operational dashboard from this and keep track of what's coming in and build my own complex reporting off of this that allows me real-time reporting and real-time monitoring. Here I can see emails that were not sent, and it gives you all the metadata about why that email was not sent. I don't believe I have a bounce currently. But then I can create real-time dashboards as well. So using Lightning Web Components, I can create my own dashboard and keep track of as these events are occurring in real time. Very useful because in the space of transactional, in the space of everybody needs their receipts and they might call in right away to say, hey, what happened? It's great to get a lead on whether or not there's a greater system problem that you can detect ahead of time. So to get started, jump into our developer documentation. It effectively covers what I covered here with some deeper example. This is generally available on email, and it's going to be generally available on SMS in our next release, which is deploying over the next couple of weeks. And I do want to remind everybody that we have Marketing Cloud developer certifications, among others. So please take a look. Hopefully you're interested in something like that. Thank you, everybody.